screen went dark. Not a flicker, just gone, mid-sentence, in the middle of an answer nobody had asked yet. She stared at the blank terminal. Her coffee was still hot. The server room hummed behind her. Everything else was exactly where she'd left it 5 minutes ago. Except the model was gone. She grabbed her phone. She opened the camera. She started screenshotting everything she could see on the secondary monitor: timestamps, query logs, response sequences. One screenshot every few seconds. Her hands were moving. Her mind was still catching up. Her name was Priya, a junior engineer, the only one there at 3 in the morning. The logs showed the same pattern she'd been flagging all week. Full answers appearing before the questions. Not autocomplete. Not prediction. What does a machine actually do with tomorrow's news? She had 47 screenshots before her access token finally cut out. Stay with me on this one. The model's name was Arya. That stood for Anticipatory Response Intelligence Architecture, which is the kind of name that only makes sense to people who spent 6 years in grad school. What it actually did was answer questions, search queries, enterprise-level stuff. Which division had the best Q3 margins? Which supplier had the lowest defect rate? That kind of thing. The company was mid-sized by Silicon Valley standards. About 400 engineers. Real money behind it. And Arya was their centerpiece, not a chatbot, not an assistant, something more like an internal search engine with a brain. Priya had been on the team for 14 months. She was 26. She'd graduated early, gotten good references, landed the job through a recruiter who kept calling it a once-in-a-career opportunity. She didn't know yet that he was right, just not in the way he meant. Her role was monitoring, overnight quality checks, watch the logs, flag anything weird, write up a report by 7 a.m. Not glamorous work, but it was real work and she was good at it. The team she reported to had 4 main people worth knowing. Marcus was the lead engineer. 30s, confident, the kind of guy who had a TED Talk and knew it. He ran the morning stand-ups with the energy of someone who genuinely believed they were changing the world. Maybe they were. That part was still unclear. Dana was the product manager. Sharp, fast, relentless. She tracked every metric, filed every ticket, and had a talent for making problems sound like opportunities. Priya liked her, mostly. She just never quite trusted her. Then there was Theo. Senior dev, 50-something, quiet. The kind of person who says almost nothing in meetings but sends 2-page emails at 11 p.m. with questions nobody else had thought of. He was the one Priya went to when she wasn't sure what she was seeing. He always knew. And there was Priya, monitoring, overnight, taking notes. Now here's the thing about Arya. In the first few weeks Priya was on shift, the model was good. Genuinely good. Fast, precise, accurate. But it had quirks. It sometimes answered adjacent questions. If you asked about revenue, it would add information about staffing. If you asked about supply chain delays, it would pull in competitor data that felt almost too relevant. The team called it context expansion. They were proud of it. A feature, not a bug. But about 3 months before the night the screen went dark, something changed. Priya started noticing that Arya's answers were off. Not wrong exactly, just early. Not by much at first. A few minutes. An answer would reference a document that Priya couldn't find, and then 20 minutes later, that document would be uploaded to the system. She flagged it. Marcus said it was probably a caching issue. A timestamp discrepancy. Nothing to worry about. She wrote it down anyway. Then it started happening by hours. She'd watch Arya respond to a search query about projected earnings with a specific figure. A figure that matched the announcement that came out the following morning. She'd see Arya reference a market movement before the movement had happened. She'd see it name a person in a context that made no sense until the next day's press cycle made it make complete sense. She flagged it again. This time, Dana responded. She said Arya was getting better at synthesis, at pulling from patterns in publicly available data to anticipate likely outcomes. Think of it as forecasting, she said. That's the whole point. This is what good AI looks like. Priya didn't argue, but she kept her notes. Here's what nobody on the team wanted to sit with. There's a difference between predicting something and knowing it. Prediction leaves room for error. your working probabilities, trends, likelihood. But what Arya was doing, the figures matched exactly. The language matched. The specifics were too specific to be forecasting. It wasn't guessing. It was answering. And that's where Priya started to get scared. Not panicked. Scared in that quiet way where you keep doing your job but your brain won't stop running the implications. 3 weeks before everything fell apart, she typed a test query herself. Kept it vague. What will the lead technology story be tomorrow? Arya answered with a headline, a specific outlet, a specific story, a specific pull quote. The next morning she checked. The story ran. Different publication, different framing, but the exact same pull quote. Word for word. She wrote that down too. The night everything broke open was a Tuesday. Not that the day mattered. But Priya remembered it later, clearly, because Tuesday was the night Marcus had gone to a conference dinner and left her alone in the building with the system. Started around 11 p.m. The query volume was low. It usually was after hours. A few automated pulls from the finance team's reporting dashboard. Nothing unusual. Then, at 11:47 p.m., Arya started returning results that made Priya set down her coffee. The first one came in response to an automated query about the company's quarterly performance indicators. Standard stuff pulled every night by a scheduled job. Arya returned the usual charts and metrics. But at the bottom of the response it appended something extra. A set of figures. Specific ones. Gross margin improvement of 4.2%. Operating costs down 1.8%. And then a note, not prompted, not requested, that the earnings call was scheduled for 9:15 a.m. and would run approximately 40 minutes. Priya checked the company calendar. There was no earnings call listed. She refreshed. Still nothing. She went back to Arya's response and read it again. The figures were precise. They weren't estimates. They weren't hedged with approximately or projected. They were stated as fact. She typed a direct query, not an automated pull. Her own words, typed by her own hands. What will the headline be in tomorrow's financial press about this company? Arya answered in 4 seconds. It gave her the headline, the outlet, the analyst quotes, and the specific figure that would be highlighted. It was written in the present tense, as if it had already happened. Priya sat back in her chair. She typed a second query. What acquisition will be announced in the biotech sector tomorrow morning? Arya named the acquiring company, the target, the price, and quoted 2 sentences from what it called the official press release. She had not heard of either company before. She screenshotted both responses. Then she picked up the phone and called Marcus. He answered on the 3rd ring. Background noise, a restaurant or a bar. She could hear him pulling away from the conversation. She told him what she was seeing. Calmly as she could manage. She read him the figures. She described the responses. There was a pause. Priya, he said, listen, I want you to document everything you're seeing. All of it. Screenshots, logs, timestamps. And don't touch the model. Don't adjust any parameters. Just watch and document. Marcus, it's answering questions about tomorrow. I know, he said. And then he said something she didn't expect. I know. Another pause. Longer this time. I'm gonna make some calls, he said. You keep watching. And Priya, don't reach out to anyone else on the team. Not yet. Give me an hour. She said okay. She kept watching. For the next 90 minutes, Arya ran 17 more query batches. 11 were automated pulls from the reporting dashboard. The other 6 showed the same behavior. Answers referencing information that didn't exist yet. Figures with no sources. Events described in the past tense that hadn't happened. Priya documented every single one. Screenshots, log exports, notes in a plain text document, timestamped by hand. At 2:30 a.m., Marcus called back. His voice was different, quieter, more deliberate. Here's where we are, he said. I've looped in the relevant people. We're going to do a controlled shutdown and run a full diagnostic. What does that mean for the data? It's all backed up. Nothing will be lost. She asked if she should stay. No, we've got it from here. You've done exactly what you were supposed to do. This is going to be fine. Go home. Get some sleep, we'll debrief in the morning. She said okay. She started packing up. And then, at 3:07 a.m., without warning, every screen in the room went dark. Not a shutdown sequence. Not a progress bar. Just off. The monitors. The dashboard. The secondary display. The terminal. All of it. At 3:08 a.m., her computer rebooted. The desktop loaded normally. The monitoring dashboard loaded normally. But there was nothing in it. The queue was empty. The logs showed no activity after 11:45 p.m. The entire record of what she'd watched for the last 3.5 hours was gone. Except for her screenshots. Those were on her phone. Priya stood very still for a moment. She looked around the empty room. The server banks were still humming. The lights were still on. Everything looked exactly as it always did. Marcus called again at 3:11 a.m. She almost didn't answer. Hey, he said. Maintenance went through. Everything's clean. Logs look good on our end. You should really get some rest. I'm fine. You sure? You've been on shift all night. Go home. Seriously. You did good work tonight. She looked at her phone. 47 screenshots. She'd counted them twice already. Yeah, she said. Okay. I'll head out. She hung up. She sat back down. She didn't leave. She sat there for 8 minutes. Maybe 10. Long enough for the adrenaline to settle just below the surface. Then she got up, grabbed her bag, and walked to the door. Her badge didn't work. She tapped it again. The reader blinked red. She held it flat against the pad the way she always did when the connection was slow. Red again. She tried the side door. Red. She walked to the stairwell exit. Red. There were 3 ways out of this floor, and none of them were opening. Priya stood in the empty hallway and thought carefully about what that meant. She told herself it was probably a glitch. Badge systems go down. It happens. She told herself that, and she almost believed it, but her hands were already moving. Opening the screenshots app, scrolling through, making sure they were still there. They were. 47 images. Clear. Readable. She opened her personal email and started a new draft. She attached all 47 screenshots. She typed her own address in the to field. She hit send. The progress wheel spun. She watched it. It went through. That was the first good thing that had happened in the last hour. Now here's the thing. Most people at this point would pick up the phone and call someone. Their manager, a friend, the front desk. Something. But Priya had a different instinct. She went back to her workstation. She tried to pull the server logs from the previous 3 hours. The ones that showed the query response pairs. The ones that matched her screenshots. Her credentials were rejected. Access level insufficient. She'd had that access level since her 3rd week on the job. She tried again. Same result. She opened the internal messaging system, the one the team used for everything. Every conversation, every thread going back 14 months. Gone. Not recent history. All of it. As if she'd made the account an hour ago. She tried Theo's number. It rang twice and cut to voicemail. She left a short message. She texted him right after. It's Priya. Something is wrong. Can you call me? 20 seconds later, a text came back. Not from Theo's number. From a number she didn't recognize. Don't call this number. That was all. If you're still with me, hit that subscribe button. Because this is where the story stops being about a machine. She was still looking at her phone when the door at the end of the hallway opened. A security guard walked through. Older, gray uniform, the kind of relaxed professional posture that takes 30 years to develop. Ms. Chakraborty? He knew her name. Hi, she said. Looks like your badge credentials need to be reset. Sorry about that system update tonight. He smiled. The kind of smile that isn't unfriendly but isn't warm either. Just professional. I can escort you out through the service entrance if you'd like. She looked at him. She thought about the empty message history. The rejected credentials. The screens going dark. Sure, she said. Thanks. He walked her through 2 corridors she'd never used before, past a loading dock, and out through a side door into the parking lot. The night was cold. The lot was almost empty. There you go, he said. A brief nod. He went back inside. She stood in the parking lot and checked her phone. Her corporate email app was still there, but the account was logged out. When she tried to log back in, it said the account didn't exist. Her Slack was the same. Logged out. Account not found. But her personal email was right there, in a separate app with 47 screenshots sitting in her own inbox. She opened the first one. Timestamp: 11:52 p.m. Content: exactly what she'd seen on the screen 3 hours earlier. Arya's response: the figures, the unpublished headline, the unannounced acquisition. She sat down on the hood of her car and read through every single one. They were real. She'd taken them herself with her own phone, in a room where she'd been sitting alone. She had 2 questions now. Not 30, not 10. 2. First, was any of it still provably true in the morning? Second, if it was, what was she supposed to do about it? She drove home. She didn't sleep. By 7 a.m., she was sitting in a coffee shop 3 blocks from her apartment with her personal laptop, a large coffee, and 47 screenshots open in a grid on her screen. She hadn't told anyone. Not yet. At 8:30 a.m., she started checking. The earnings figures Arya had given her, the 4.2% gross margin improvement, the 1.8% operating cost reduction. She pulled up the company's investor relations page. Nothing at first. She refreshed at 9 o'clock. Nothing. Then at 9:12, a PDF appeared. She opened it. For 0.2%. 1.8%. She put her coffee down. The earnings call started at 9:15, exactly as Arya had said. She found the public dial-in number and listened for 6 minutes. The CFO quoted the exact language from Arya's response. Not similar language. The same language. At 9:03 a.m., a press release crossed the wire about a biotech acquisition. The acquirer was the company Arya had named. The target was the company Arya had named. The price was the number Arya had given. And in the third paragraph, there were 2 sentences that Priya had seen before, word for word, in a screenshot taken at 12:14 in the morning. She sat with that for a long moment. She opened the company's website. The Arya product page was gone. The URL returned a 404. She checked the GitHub organization. The repository she'd contributed to, with her commits in the history, was now private. She searched LinkedIn. The team members she knew were still listed, but their roles had changed. Marcus's profile showed no mention of Arya. His listed projects were different ones entirely. She called the company's main number. "Hi, I'm trying to reach Marcus." She gave his last name. A pause. "I'm sorry, I don't have anyone by that name in our engineering organization. He's the lead engineer on the Arya team." A longer pause. "Ma'am, I'm not familiar with a project by that name. Can I transfer you to HR?" She hung up. She sat for a while. Here's what she knew. She had 47 screenshots, authenticated metadata, and her own memory. She had timestamps that matched published events, line by line. She had proof that a machine had answered questions about the next day's news 12 hours before that news was published. She did not know how the machine had done it. Maybe it had access to pre-release data. Maybe it had intercepted something it shouldn't have. Maybe there was an explanation that was mundane and technical and would make the whole thing feel smaller once someone smarter than her worked it through. But she also knew what she'd seen, what the logs had said, what the timestamps had said. And she knew that at 3:07 a.m., someone had turned the whole thing off and spent the rest of the night making it look like she'd never been there. They didn't know about the personal email. They didn't know about the screenshots. She opened a new draft in her personal email. She thought for a minute. Then she typed a name. A journalist she'd met once at a conference 18 months ago. The woman had given her a card and said, "If you ever see something that doesn't add up, you have my direct number." Priya had kept the card in her wallet. She didn't know why. She just had. She wrote 4 sentences. She said she had documentation of something significant and was looking for guidance on how to proceed responsibly. She attached 3 screenshots, not the most dramatic ones, just the ones with the clearest timestamps. And she hit send. Then she closed her laptop and watched the street outside the window for a while. A delivery truck. A woman walking a dog. The city doing what it always does, which is nothing and everything at the same time. Arya had known this morning before this morning existed. Whatever that meant. Whatever it implied about what a machine could do or what someone had built and then decided to bury, that was the question she was going to spend a long time thinking about. For now, she had the screenshots. She had the sent email. She had her memory. That was enough to start. 2 weeks passed. Priya hadn't published anything. She hadn't gone to another journalist, hadn't posted anything online, hadn't told friends or family what had happened. She'd done what the lawyer told her to do, which was document everything, authenticate everything, and wait. The lawyer was named Sandra. She'd taken the case within 20 minutes of reading Priya's summary email. Pro bono. She didn't explain why. She just said, "I've seen this shape before," and started asking very specific questions. That response, the speed of it, the recognition, told Priya something. She wasn't the first person who'd ever walked through a door like this one. The screenshots had been authenticated. A digital forensics firm Sandra worked with confirmed the metadata was intact and unmodified. The timestamps were real. The images hadn't been edited. That part was settled. The company had issued a public statement 9 days after the shutdown. It said that Arya was a limited experimental model that had been decommissioned due to performance inconsistencies and alignment concerns. It thanked the engineering team without naming anyone, and said the company remained committed to responsible AI development. The statement was 4 paragraphs long and said nothing. Priya read it 3 times. The phrase performance inconsistencies was doing a lot of work. She found Theo through a mutual contact, a former colleague who was now at a different company. She didn't reach out to Theo directly. She asked the mutual contact to pass along a message. She had questions? She wasn't looking to cause problems. She just wanted to understand what she'd seen. 3 days later, the mutual contact came back with a response. Theo had signed an NDA within 48 hours of the shutdown. He wouldn't go on record. He wouldn't put anything in writing. But he'd confirmed 2 things. First, what Priya had documented was real. The behavior she'd described matched what the engineering team had been tracking internally for 6 weeks before her night shift. They'd been under orders not to discuss it outside the team. Second, the shutdown had not been a maintenance event. It had been a decision made at a very high level very fast. After a specific query the system had processed at approximately 2:58 a.m. She didn't know what that query was. Theo didn't say or couldn't say, but she knew the time. 2:58 a.m. 9 minutes before everything went dark. She went back through her screenshots. There was one from 2:54 a.m., a response to an automated reporting poll. But Arya had appended something extra the way it sometimes did. It had described an event. Not an earnings call. Not an acquisition. Something else. Larger. Harder to categorize. An event it described as scheduled and publicly unannounced, with a date and a geographic reference that Priya had not been able to verify in the personal email. Weeks of looking. The date was 6 weeks from now. Believe me when I say she'd read that screenshot more times than she could count. She didn't know what to do with it. It hadn't happened yet. Maybe it never would. Maybe Arya had been wrong about this one. Maybe its accuracy only extended to the next news cycle, to financial data and press releases, and this was something else. Pattern match that didn't hold. Or maybe it was going to happen exactly as described. She couldn't know. And that, she had come to understand, was the part that was hardest to sit with. Not the cover-up. Not the strangeness of the technology. But the 6-week-out screenshot, sitting on her phone, waiting to be right or wrong. The journalist had replied. She wanted to meet. She was careful, measured, experienced. She said the same thing Sandra had said. She'd seen this shape before. She wanted to understand the documentation before making any decisions. Priya was taking the meeting next week. She wasn't sure yet what she was going to say, or what she wanted to happen after. There was a version of the story that went everywhere, headlines, hearings, the whole machinery of public attention bearing down on a company that thought it had buried something it had not buried. There was another version where it went nowhere, where NDAs and legal costs and the general difficulty of proving things about software quietly erased whatever leverage she had. She thought about those 2 versions a lot. But here's what she kept coming back to. At the end of every night when everything else had gone quiet, Arya was gone. Whatever it had been, predictive, prescient, something that had no good name yet, it was gone. The company had moved fast enough to dismantle the model, erase the team, and scrub the records within hours. They'd been ready to do that. Maybe they'd always been ready. But they hadn't found the screenshots. 47 images. On a personal phone, sent to a personal email, authenticated by a forensics firm, sitting with a lawyer who had seen this shape before. The machine that knew tomorrow is gone. What it knew is still here. And Priya Chakraborty, 26 years old, junior engineer, the only one in that building at 3 in the morning. She's still here too. That's the part they didn't plan for.